Good morning. So happy to be here with you today. We're going to get started right away by finding a partner. So I would like you to go ahead and find an eye contact partner, someone who is not sitting next to you. Stand up and have a conversation about two things. Number one, what are you grateful for? And number two, what are you most looking forward to, either later today or later this week? So, standing up, finding an eye contact partner, and having a 3-minute conversation about these two questions. And if you could please bring your conversations to a stopping point in the next 30 seconds, please. And thank you for bringing your conversations to a close. Please thank your eye contact partner and return to your seat. So today we're going to talk about poverty, the effects on the brain, and some things that educators can do about it. So we're focusing on those three things: what poverty looks like, including defining poverty for you today. How does poverty affect the brain? And then what does that do for students, and what does that look like for students when they're in school or in your classroom? And finally, there's several things we're going to talk about today, but identify what is one thing you can do for your students. We're going to utilize a note-taking device today. Just take your plain sheet of paper. You can fold it in thirds or create a table on it with 3 columns called what, so what, and now what. So go ahead, take that plain sheet of paper, divide it in thirds, create your table. For your note-taking, your what column will identify the topic we're talking about. The so what may be some facts that you may want to remember or some ideas. And then your now what? What connections are you making for the future for students in your school and in your classroom? What are some things you may do in the future? So let's just finish that up, take a moment, create a note-taking device for today. Our first topic today is talking about what poverty looks like. So currently there are 34 million Americans living in poverty. It's a staggering number. So what might that look like? For some Americans, that means I'm living on $2 or less a day. $2. Some of us spend twice that on a beverage in the morning or in the evening. $2 sometimes can't even buy a gallon of milk in most places. $2 a day. One of the great books that I've read and learned a lot from is $2 a Day, Living on Almost Nothing in America. It follows the case study of 4 or 5 Americans who are living in poverty and what they go through in their daily lives, just trying to survive and make it day by day on about $2 a day. The federal definition of poverty is $26,500 for a household with 4 people. And that's the 2021 definition. So if you are single, living in the lower 48 or Washington, D.C., and you have an income of $12,880 or less, you fall under the federal definition of poverty. The number of people in the household means both adults and children living in that household. Of course, Alaska and Hawaii have slightly higher costs of living, so their poverty thresholds are a little bit higher than the rest of the United States. However, when I think about cities like Washington, D.C., like Chicago, New York City, San Diego, the cost of living is pretty high there, yet they do not have different poverty definitions. So how does this translate to students? So let's take a guess. In 2016, which is the most recent data we had, what percent of all US students in public schools came from homes that met the standard for receiving free or reduced lunch? Just take a guess in your groups and shout out your answer. What do you think that percent is? So it's 52% of all US students qualified for free or reduced lunch in the United States. So let's break that down. For a student who qualifies for free lunch, their family income is below 130% of the poverty rate, which means that a family of 4 would have a $34,450 income coming in or less to meet that free lunch cutoff. Pre-tax per week, that's about $662. For reduced rates, it's up to 185% of the poverty rate. So families of 4 that bring in about $49,000 a year or just under $950 a week would qualify for reduced lunch. So in Michigan, the rate of free and reduced lunch students is about 50.5%. This has been slowly increasing over time the past 10 years and has an impact on our students in our schools. So how do people in poverty get by? So if you were to live on that $2 a day or less, if you were to be a family of 4 living on $26,000 a year, how do you get by with providing a safe shelter, a safe home for your children? How do you make sure that they eat a nutritious meal every day? How do you get to work? How do you handle everything that needs to get handled in the day? We're going to participate in an activity, and this is going to take about 30 minutes. It's called Stack the Deck. And the facilitators in the room have the directions, and they are going to need 3 volunteers. So volunteer 1, volunteer 2, and finally a volunteer that is called the banker. So we have our 3 volunteers and our facilitator. Facilitators, go ahead and check the time, and in 30 minutes, we'll be back and you can start the video again. Welcome back. This activity really is impactful once you start seeing those cards moving around and thinking about what they mean and how expensive it is to live in the United States and trying to make it by day. So thank you for your participation with this. So let's continue our conversation on poverty and talk about what you already know about the effects of poverty on your students. So what I would like you to do is turn to an elbow partner, and I would like you to look at these statements on the screen. With your elbow partner, take about 3 minutes and determine, are these statements true or false? And if you could please bring your conversations to a stopping point in the next 30 seconds, please. And thank you for bringing your conversations to a close. Let's take a look at these statements. So, 1 through 5. Number 1, poor people value education about the same as the middle class. That is true. Value is that importance that you put on something, and people value education no matter what their socioeconomic status. How we see value acted out may look differently to some of us than others. When I look at someone valuing education, I may have the expectation that their actions are going to be showing up to school on a regular basis, answering the phone when I need them to, and participating in their child's education by being present where I can see them. However, others may look at someone valuing education as providing a safe place for their children at home to ensure that they can study, that they have clean clothes, that they're working during the day so that their child can do better for their future. They're trying to provide for their children, and their value on education doesn't look like mine because during the day they work. So they cannot make it and be present in the school, yet education is still important to them. So, number 2, there are rich people who are lazy and lack ambition. There are definitely people along the whole strata that are lazy and lack ambition, but there are some that work hard and they're really trying to do better for themselves and for their families. There are a lot of people that live in poverty that have multiple jobs and they're working 12 to 14 hours a day, but their income just doesn't get them over that poverty level. 3, we know that money doesn't change everything and that money is not the solution. Typically, it's the infrastructure and the systems we set up that really bring about true change. So that one is also false. And number 4 and 5 are also false. If you put these together, when we ask parents to do more, what more must they do? Some of them are doing all they can right now and can't give more of whatever it is you're looking for. It's a team effort. It is up to the families, to the schools, and to the students to really do their part and come together as a community to lift students up and help them achieve. So 4 and 5 are also false. So let's take a guess. Just shout out your answers. How many students do you think drop out of school every day in the United States? Just take a guess. So not being there to hear your guesses, I'm wondering if it's a surprise that in 2018, 2.1 million students dropped out of high school in the United States alone. That's about a student every 15 seconds or 5,800 students a day. 5,800 students a day dropping out of high school. Thinking about the local school districts in our area, that could be a local school district. So imagining that many students, just a whole district disappearing every day because students are dropping out. Students from poverty already have the deck stacked against them, as we found out in our activity, but also with their odds of graduation. They only have about a 50% chance or 50% odds of graduating compared to those who do not come from homes that are living in poverty. So knowing that we have a high number of student dropouts in the United States, and that most of them are probably going to come from low socioeconomic households, we need to do what we can to get students to graduate. We need to get them job ready and college ready. And today we're going to talk about some ways to do that. Before we move on, I'd like you to take out your note-taking paper. We're going to take 3 minutes to do a silent reflection on the what, so what, and now what from your activity this morning, as well as from what you've learned. So about 3 minutes. And about 30 seconds to finish up your last thought. And thank you. So let's talk about poverty and a definition for poverty. The federal government has a financial definition that a family of four making less than $26,500 a year qualifies for as living in poverty by that definition. Today we are going to define poverty a little bit differently. Poverty is not a culture, but a chronic condition affecting the mind, body, and soul, resulting from multiple adverse risk factors. Again, poverty is not a culture, but a chronic condition affecting the mind, body, and soul, resulting from multiple adverse risk factors. Our bodies, our minds, our soul are disrupted by experiences and risk factors related to poverty, related to trauma. Living in poverty can look like a traumatic event. So let's talk about some of those differences because students that come from low socioeconomic households have differences in their minds, their bodies, and their souls based on those risk factors. So let's first talk about executive function skills in your brain. IQ can actually be influenced by how many risk factors a person experiences. So the greater the number of risk factors that someone is exposed to, it correlates with a lower IQ. Some of those risk factors could include domestic violence, prejudice or racism, experience abuse at home, bullying, having peer problems and friendship problems, living in an unsafe neighborhood, being worried about survival on a day-to-day basis, including nutrition, or having the frequent loss of loved ones because something happens to them, they're dying, they're sick, or they're leaving them. And students from poverty are more likely to experience these risk factors that contribute to that chronic or acute stress, that ongoing stress that relates to a condition affecting their mind, body, and soul. In addition, students living in low SES households tend to experience early language loss, or they have to play catch up because there's gaps in early language compared to other households. So, for example, a child growing up in a low SES household during their first 4 years will experience about 13 million words overall. Compare that to a child from a middle SES household where that doubles to 26 million and then goes up to 45 million for those in a high SES household. So language matters. We know that language is important in that language development. So there is a gap early on for students who come from poverty. So what can we do to help them overcome some of that impact of living in poverty that has on them? So the first thing we can do is we can help them build cognitive capacity by fostering neurogenesis. So this is where we get into that technical stuff with the brain, and it's a lot of fun for me. So neurogenesis is the production of brand new brain cells. So we are not born with a finite number of brain cells. Brain cells can grow throughout your lifetime, which is pretty exciting. The production of new brain cells is correlated to improved cognitive performance, elevated mood, so less anger and less stress, better weight regulation, and enhanced memory. And the great thing about this is that you can increase or decrease the benefits of neurogenesis by what you're doing in your classrooms and in your buildings. So the creation of brand new brain cells is enhanced by exercise and movement, complex environments, new learning, pro-social contacts with peers and family members, good nutrition, and low stress. However, neurogenesis can be reduced by living in distress, inactivity or boredom, depression and poor nutrition, isolation and low social status. If you look at some of those factors, those are common for students who live in low SES households. And as I look at these and I think about them, some of us through the past 11 months now, almost 12 months, living in this time of COVID, have experienced some of these factors. Some of us are less active. some depressed, definitely isolated. Some of our students and families are experiencing these same things as well. So the production of new brain cells is reduced by these. So thinking, how can we enhance not only the production of the new brain cells, but of their lives as well by providing them everything we can to reduce those factors. One thing that educators can do in the classroom is focus on vocabulary every single day. Vocabulary and language are so important for students and for our brains. There are a lot of vocabulary programs out there. It doesn't matter which one you use, just use it consistently. Use it every single day. Have students say words, pronounce words, have them talk about words. It's difficult to understand language if you're just reading and writing it. Students have to process it using their voice and hearing those words. Imagine being even in a foreign language class and trying to learn new vocabulary, let's say in Spanish, and you're reading the words and you're writing the words, you're seeing the words, you're writing the words. You're seeing them and you're writing them, but you never hear someone speak the word and you never speak the word yourself. How do you learn that language? How do you build that vocabulary without hearing it and without saying it? Unfortunately, with some virtual learning, this is how foreign language has been taught. Had a conversation with a colleague the other day. It was very disheartening to hear that. And what a struggle those students must be having. So even with virtual instruction, getting students involved in vocabulary every single day and having them say words and hear them on a regular basis will help with neurogenesis. A second thing that we can do to build cognitive capacity with our students is to help them with their working memory. So working memory is the driver of cognition. It's really what pushes us with our thinking. It's required for problem solving, language, math, prediction, and every higher order thinking process. Unfortunately, students living in poverty have a weaker working memory. The great thing is you can teach working memory. You can practice this on a daily basis with students to increase their working memory. So in your working memory, you actually have sounds or pictures. And those sounds or pictures are held on for a few seconds or moments and manipulated to create either new information or to repeat that information. So again, your working memory that drives your thinking, it takes in sounds and pictures, holds on to them for a few minutes, and manipulates that information. We're going to practice this today together so that you can see some examples of what working memory is and some activities you can do around building working memory with students. So now we saw that research told us that students from poverty might have some trouble with their working memory. So while they are building those skills, some workarounds that you can have for them are to allow more time for taking notes, having some note-taking tools for them, and teaching them how to take notes. Using a pause technique where every few minutes you pause to let the content sink in. Might be a good time to review that content and allow some time to take notes. Chunk that content to help with understanding and then review that frequently. Get their attention to learning so they're primed and ready for that information. It could be just an attention getter, something fun, doing a fast activity that gets them moving prior to learning really activates the brain for learning. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just movement for about 30 seconds, 60 seconds to get the brain primed for learning. So when you're creating activities for students to work on their working memory, you have to determine, is this going to be an auditory activity or a visual activity? And then connect it to the content you're working on. So no matter what the lessons hold for the day, you can make connections with your working memory activities. Then you want to increase and challenge in complexity over time. So starting out a little bit simpler with the activities that you use, and then increase in challenge and complexity over time. So let's see this in action. We're going to practice. Today, we're going to work on visual working memory. Just visual, not auditory today, because I'm not there to facilitate each group. But let's get going. I'd like you to take out a scrap piece of paper, or you can use your note-taking sheet on the back, and something to write with. So once that's ready, just go ahead and set down your writing utensil and your paper and pay attention to the screen. I'm going to put something on the screen, and once I remove it from the screen, I want you to go ahead and write down what you see. Okay, so keep your pen or pencil on the table, flash it up for a few seconds, and then I want you to recreate what you have seen. All right, here we go. And go ahead and write down what you saw. So let's take a look and see how you did. All right, how many of you got it? It's always interesting to walk around when you're doing these activities with students to see how they interpret those pictures as well. I've seen people draw the individual squares. I've seen a table. I've seen people draw the bananas. Others write the word banana. Someone even had their crayons out and were writing the words in the different colors. So it's always interesting to see what people come up with. So for our next activity, we are increasing in challenge and increasing in complexity. So this one will be a little bit more difficult than the first one. You'll have a few more seconds of time, but again, same activity. I'm going to put something up on the screen, take it off, and write down what you see. And here we go. And go ahead and write down what you saw. Just a few more seconds to finish up that list. And pencils down. So take up a hole in your room and let's see how many of you got at least 3 of them. How many of you got at least 6? How many of you got 10 or more? Because there were 12 total, I'll tell you that much. And then some of the words may have stuck out to you. How many of you got the word eagle? How many got the word thimble? How about point? Did anybody get the word needle? And I'll tell you, it's always interesting when participating in this activity because the word needle is not on the list. It's interesting what our brain does for us. We start to categorize words, pick out the ones that don't fit, and then even put in ones that aren't there. Again, just like the last activity, very interesting to walk around to see how students are writing down their answers. Some create just a long list in any order. Some will try to put the words exactly as they saw them on the screen in those positions. So some other activities that you could do, including this, again with this, connect it to your content that you're working on. Use words that are going to be relevant for student learning. So while this activity just took a couple minutes, less than 5 minutes, students can be working on increasing their working memory, but connecting it back to the content for the day. So some elementary working memory activities you can focus on in addition to working with vocabulary and using some of those words and picture activities. Simon Says actually is a good activity for working memory. You start out simple and then increase with complexity and challenge over time. So you might start off with one action that you want students to do, and that would be that auditory because you're saying that. And then begin to increase with challenge and complexity and say maybe, okay, Simon says put your hands on your head and then tap your toes. So you start adding on actions to those directions. And speaking of directions, having students repeat directions no matter what age is always good for working memory. Again, auditory or visual information that students are holding on to for a few moments and then having to do something with that information. So when students have to repeat directions, they're taking in either what you said or what they read and then verbalizing those directions. Playing an instrument at any age is great for working memory. We think about that dreaded recorder that students bring home all the time. It's great for working memory. Brains love the arts. And so whether it's playing an instrument or performing art or creating art, those are all excellent activities. For secondary students, again, that vocabulary, the repeating directions, having them spell words. So going forwards and then backwards. So I might ask you to spell the word ocean, one of our vocabulary words for science. And the student would say the word, spell it forward, and then spell it backward. So not only are they working on vocabulary that's related to their content, they're also working on that working memory. And again, with a lot of content now, there's a lot of research-based online games and learning activities that will help build those working memory skills. So again, get buy-in from students. Tell them why they're doing this. Students love learning about their brain. knowing that their brain can grow and that they can build new brain cells through neurogenesis, giving high quality continuous feedback to students, increasing challenge and complexity over time, and practicing on a regular basis is really going to help build the cognitive capacity of students. And finally, a third way to build that cognitive capacity is to foster a growth mindset. So you want to foster a growth mindset not only in your students, but in yourself as well. Many of us are familiar with the research by Carol Dweck and then built upon by many other researchers and authors about that fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. How you can grow over time in your intelligence and your talent and not be fixed at birth with what you're able to know and do. So students are not going to truly believe they can do something unless you believe in them as well. So building cognitive capacity. Let's take about 2 to 3 minutes and reflect on building cognitive capacity with your students. And about 30 more seconds to finish up your thoughts. And thank you. So we're learning that brains can change every day and that we have impact on that as educators. And if we do some things just a little bit differently, we can help students grow new brain cells, just like you guys grew new brain cells today. And we can help overcome some of those impacts of poverty in their lives. So we're going to talk about effect size here just for a second to give you some context for the effects of poverty on students. So if we look at factors of interventions that affect a student's education, if something has a 0 effect, it really just doesn't affect their education much. If something has a zero point 0.4 or higher, it has really strong effects on a student's education. So we need to understand the value of educational or classroom factors on students' lives. So thinking about low income and how that affects students from poverty, and the effect of a good teacher on students, the effect of a good teacher is almost double what the impact of poverty is on students' education. Teachers have a much greater effect on students than poverty does. Good teachers matter. Good teachers can help with those impacts on student lives. In addition, goal setting and expectations for students have massive impacts on students' educations. Students' expectations that they can do things, that they can learn, that they are positive about those expectations is a 1.44. Again, a 0.4 was a good impact. This is 1.44. Teacher expectations on student success are 1.03. So imagine if students believe they can learn, that they have high expectations for themselves. If teachers have high expectation for students, they're going to be successful. Setting these goals and having these expectations is fantastic. And make sure you're setting those goals high. Eric Jensen, whose work that I use for research for these presentations, has a gaudy goal, he calls it. His gaudy goal is that 100% of students will graduate from high school job ready or college ready. That is truly what he wants to make sure happens. I have a gaudy goal as well. Based on my learning and based on my work and my experience, my gaudy goal is that 100% of educators will not let students fail. I think about my influence that I have and what I am able to do with my knowledge and skills, and this is my gaudy goal. Today, I'm challenging you. What is your mission? What is your gaudy goal? So I'd like you to take out a Post-it, and we're going to take 3 minutes, and I want you, based on your experience, based on your learning, not just from today, but in the past, what is your gaudy goal? Again, Eric Jensen, 100% of students will graduate job or career or college ready. Mine is 100% of teachers or educators will not let students fail. What is your gaudy goal? Let's take a moment for some silent reflection. more moments to finish up your thoughts. Make sure you have something written down because you're going to need it for the next activity. I am going to invite you to please stand up. I would like you to find a partner in the room. You're going to find someone who is dressed similarly to you, and you're going to have a conversation. Share your gaudy goal with them, provide some feedback, and then they'll share their goal with you. So we'll take about 3 minutes to find a partner that is dressed similarly to you, share your goals with each other, and provide some feedback. In about 30 seconds, if you could bring your conversation to a stopping point, please. And thank you for bringing your conversations to a close. Please thank your partner and return to your seat. I urge you to take that gaudy goal, take that post-it, revisit that on a regular basis, refine your goal, and keep it somewhere where you can see it every day to remind you that this is what you're working for. I wrote my goal 5 years ago on a post-it. The stickiness is gone from the back of it, but I still have that post-it. Keep it close and keep it alive. So to review our morning today, we talked about what poverty looks like in the United States, and a little bit in Michigan. We talked about how poverty can affect the brain negatively, but we also learned that through neurogenesis, you can create new brain cells, and there are things that educators can do to help students because teachers are the strongest change agent in students' lives. I thank you for your time this morning, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Feel free to contact me if you'd like additional resources or have any questions. Have a great day.